Massive crowds have taken to the streets of Tehran, but these are not protesters against the regime, they are supporters of the regime, and now they are losing their minds because they cannot believe that Iran has just surrendered. Yes, currently a large mass in Iran is completely opposed to the regime. People see the Mullah regime as the sole party responsible for a completely paralyzed economy, and they are not wrong about that. However, now even those who support the Mullah regime are criticizing it very harshly. Welcome to Military Chronicle. Let's begin. That is why they are organizing protests against those in power, against those who negotiate with the United States, and they are asking the Supreme Leader to finally make a statement. It has been more than a month since the Supreme Leader was chosen, and the Iranian people have still not heard from him or seen him. And now it seems that the regime has been dragged into a full-scale civil war. Politicians are confronting each other. The military opposes those negotiating with the United States, and people are losing faith in everyone, so let's see exactly what happened. For those who missed our video yesterday, this was the statement that started it all. Yesterday, Iran's Minister of Foreign Affairs made this statement saying that, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage of all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz was declared completely open during the remaining period of the ceasefire. This statement was a shock to people all over the world, including people within the Iranian government itself. Now we see leaders of parliament and commanders of the Revolutionary Guard speaking out against what the foreign minister said. They said they could not believe it. Some are calling for his dismissal, and others want something even worse. Here is a report on what is happening inside Iran right now. The Islamic Republic is showing a major internal fracture at the highest levels in real time. After Agachi and Trump stated that the Strait of Hormuz is open, media linked to the Revolutionary Guard are now openly questioning officials, warning about confusion in the country and demanding silence. At the same time, in their messages through state television, the Revolutionary Guard makes it clear that the passage remains controlled, restricted, and under its supervision. Within the regime's support base, pro-IRGC and pro-Guard channels are boiling with visible anger over this supposed agreement to open the Strait of Hormuz. This situation exposes the direct contradiction between the diplomatic narrative and the military reality. Even media aligned with the regime are already showing signs that something does not add up. And this is something we talked about just a few weeks before negotiations began. Iran does not have a government right now. Iran has multiple different centers of power, and the United States is negotiating with the strongest one. However, this does not change the fact that there are other people who hold power within Iran, and that their incentives and objectives are actually different from those who are negotiating. This is a topic blocked in mainstream media and on some social platforms. The YouTube algorithm also considers this topic risky, but I don't care. I will continue to tell you the facts with the most accurate data. As Military Chronicle, to help me overcome the algorithm barrier without using any click tricks, you can support me by liking the video. Everyone is trying to make sure they stay on top once this war ends, and in doing so, they want to ensure that the other side does not benefit from the ceasefire or the end of the war. Because when it comes to governing the country after this war ends, whoever is negotiating with the United States will definitely have the advantage. And that is exactly why we now see the other factions basically trying to overthrow each other. This country could literally be dragged into a civil war. And as I said before, while all of this is happening, the new Supreme Leader of Iran has not made a single audio or video statement. Basically, since this war began, we have not heard his voice or seen him. He could be in a coma, or maybe he is dead. We do not know. He has made a couple of text-based statements, but someone else is reading them. How can we know if they really come from the Supreme Leader? If I have learned anything about Iran, it is much more likely that I believe that statement definitely does not come from the Supreme Leader and that Iranian state media are simply lying. I could be writing those statements myself. You don't know. We do not know who the Supreme Leader is or where he is. Now things do not look very good for Iran's Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the situation worsened with statements made by President Trump and the United States Central Command. You see, after the Minister of Foreign Affairs told the world that the Strait of Hormuz was open, the Central Command issued its own statement saying that the U.S. naval blockade is still ongoing. No matter what Iran does, Iranian ports will not be used by any ship. Then President Trump basically repeated the same message. Now, I am sure you can understand why this looks like a total surrender for Iranians. Iran only had one card to play, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs publicly gave away that leverage without getting practically anything in return. There's no long-term peace agreement, and the U.S. blockade still continues. Iran's economy continues to collapse. And that is exactly why even people who work with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, his political colleagues, are speaking out publicly against him. Look at this lawmaker calling for the dismissal of the foreign minister. Iranian legislator Morteza Mahmoudi said that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abbas Araghchi, could face dismissal for his words on social media, accusing him of repeating untimely statements during a sensitive period of war. Mahmoudi said in a Twitter post that if it were not for the excuse of war, Arachi would have been dismissed for his Twitter message, stating that this was not the first time the Minister of Foreign Affairs had made statements that he described as strange and untimely at critical moments. Mahmoudi added that such comments had an impact on global oil and energy markets. Now, I do not know who this guy is. I do not follow Iranian domestic politics. But anyway, this guy clearly has power in domestic politics, and he is right on one point. Take a look at this chart. These are yesterday's oil prices right after Arachi's statement. They fell below $90 for the first time in a long time. That morning they were above $100 per barrel, and with the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, they dropped by as much as $3 because of that news. In a way, this was Iran's card. If Iran can close the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices go up, and this creates internal and external pressure on Trump to back down or make concessions to Iran during negotiations. However, now that prices have dropped, the pressure on the United States is disappearing. And let's be honest, in military terms, Iran does not matter. Iran no longer has any military power. The only power they have is drones that they can use to close the Strait of Hormuz. But because of the statement by Iran's Minister of Foreign Affairs, that leverage has been severely weakened. This is exactly why Iranian society is turning against those who are negotiating, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs who made that statement. And I am being very honest about this. We saw the statement from that politician. This was not an isolated incident. Here is another person, another politician, doing the same and speaking in the same way. This time we have Ayatollah Mourani. The former Minister of Culture warned on Friday that Iran risks losing its strategic advantage and the information war if it does not act quickly at sensitive moments. If the Supreme National Security Council, the highest body in Iran, does not appoint a capable spokesperson and does not speak in time at sensitive and necessary moments and does not take the initiative to shape the first narrative, we will suffer great damage in psychological warfare and the war of narratives. In simple terms, this man is saying that Iran is losing the propaganda war, and that was one of the few areas where Iran had some hope. And that is exactly why he is so angry. But let's be honest, Iran may be losing the propaganda war, but they are doing the best they can. They are going down fighting. And if you do not believe me, look at this piece of propaganda they released at the beginning of the war. Here is a statement from the Tasnim news agency of Iranian state media, and in very clear words, they basically say that the statement made by the Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs is bad and incomplete. This statement is creating confusion and ambiguity within the country, and people are angry. This is exactly the reason why people criticize the Foreign Affairs Minister. They also added that passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be controlled by the Revolutionary Guard. Any ship that wants to pass must coordinate with the Navy of the Revolutionary Guard. The situation worsened so much that the president of the Iranian parliament, who was leading the delegation that went to negotiate with the United States, had to come out and make a statement basically saying that no matter what Iran's foreign affairs minister has said or what President Trump is saying, none of that counts. Take a look at his statement. 1. The President of the United States made 7 claims in 1 hour, and it turned out that all 7 were false. They did not win the war with these lies, and they certainly will not get anywhere in negotiations either. With the continuation of the American blockade, the Strait of Hormuz will not remain open. Passage through the Strait of Hormuz will take place according to a designated route and with Iran's authorization. Whether the strait is open or closed and the regulations governing it will be determined on the ground, not on social media. Judging by the way he talks about social media, it is as if it had not been his own man who made that statement. First of all, Arachi made his statement claiming that the Strait of Hormuz was open before President Trump. But this is where Iranian politics has reached. No one knows who is in command. However, I want to give you more context on a couple of points he mentioned. First of all, a couple of ships have already passed through the Strait of Hormuz using the normal route. That is, they passed through the middle of the strait. They did not go through the route Iran has been forcing ships to take. And this tells us many things. But first, I know that a couple of ships really do not mean much. Hundreds of ships used to pass through the strait every day, so a couple of ships will not change the global oil crisis. They will not solve it in any way. But it does tell us something important. These ships passed through the routes where Iran claimed there were naval mines, but yesterday, literally minutes after the Foreign Affairs Minister's statement, a cruise ship that had been stuck in Dubai for 47 years said, "I'm going to pass, I'm going to try." And it crossed through the middle of the Strait of Hormuz and is now in international waters. So this tells us that maybe there are no naval mines, or maybe there is a specific route in the middle of the strait that can be used safely. I feel that this will be important later. However, here is the second important point. Remember this man. He is the same Galif, the president of the Iranian parliament, who said last week that he would not go to Pakistan to negotiate with the United States unless there was a ceasefire in Lebanon. And guess what? Last week there was no ceasefire in Lebanon, and he still went to Pakistan and negotiated. The ceasefire in Lebanon happened yesterday, or I think 2 days ago, so this man has a habit of lying, and that is probably what he is doing here, or perhaps he is trying to compensate for the chaos happening within Iran. They negotiated with the United States and said, hey, the Strait of Hormuz is open. And then they saw the reactions from the public, from the Revolutionary Guard, and from other politicians, and now they are trying to walk back their word in order to maintain control of power. Now, this is where I want to share something interesting with you, and it has to do with the Twitter account of the President of the Parliament, because apparently someone from the United States is actually behind the tweets this man is posting. And the reason for this is that some of the tweets that this Galif was posting about this war fit too well within American culture. It seemed as if someone who understood how American psychology works was managing this Twitter account and posting these tweets. And guess what? Iran Wire conducted an investigation about this and found that the speculation was true. They also found out who it might be and where he lives. So let's take a look at this investigative journalism report, Meet the Man Behind Galibaf's Twitter account. Since the war began, this account has posted almost daily, sometimes in English, sometimes sprinkled with emojis or Gen Z memes, addressing the American public directly. Observers have noted the sophisticated English, the understanding of the American psyche, and the use of internet subculture. This suggested an English-fluent advisor belonging to Iran's third generation. This is the generation that belongs to the families of the Iranian elite, who are part of the Islamic regime. However, the third generation does not actually live in Iran. They are much more cosmopolitan, meaning they live all over the world. Therefore, they understand international culture, especially Western culture. Now, according to this investigation, the person responsible for managing this account is Maisam Samabadi. He lives in Glendale, California. He comes from a family connected to the regime and has a history of managing pro-government media networks in the past. In fact, in 2003, and probably for a long time after that, he personally advised Galib. We do not know exactly when he left that position, but it seems that he has returned to that role, helping his country, to which he is loyal, in times of war. It is somewhat hypocritical that a person loves the Islamic regime so much but lives in California. He wants to protect the regime so that it can continue ruining the lives of 92 million Iranians. And meanwhile, he apparently wants to live in the United States, a country that the Islamic regime considers the great Satan. This means that this is another perfect example of the hypocrisy we have been covering around the world. The families of the Chinese elite, of Chinese Communist Party politicians, are here in the West, sometimes even here in the United States. The same applies to Russian elites. Russian oligarchs literally beg the United States government not to include them on sanctions lists. And the same applies to Iran.